Hello and welcome back to my workshop. What we're going to talk about today is human rights. In particular, we're going to talk about the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is a document which was agreed by all of the then members of the United Nations in 1948, and it's probably most famous for having been championed by Eleanor Roosevelt, who herself is most famous for having championed the UDHR. It is a quite concise declaration of what the United Nations considered to be the unalienable rights of humans on Earth, and is binding on all the members of the United Nations, including, of course, ourselves. That is in the United Kingdom, and through the United Kingdom it's binding on the subordinate administrations, which are the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly and the Northern Irish Assembly. As well as this, we also have the UK Human Rights Act of 1998, which embodied many of the concepts contained in the UDHR, and added a few others. However, we're only going to talk about the UDHR today, since it is quite a concise document. I'll put a link to it in the text below and you can go and read it for yourself. We'll go through the 30 articles of the UDHR now. I think that the behaviours of the UK governments, the subordinate administrations and many other countries around the world seriously breaching the Human Rights Declaration. So we'll go through it and I'll explain which ones I think are being broken. There's 30 articles in total. The first article is a very simple one. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Well, a nice thing to say. It seems fairly self-evident. The second one's slightly more detailed. Article 2. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. So basically that says everybody's included, regardless of any particular condition of their life. The first two articles basically just set out the stage for the rest of the declaration by stating all the qualifying people, and basically everybody on earth qualifies to be considered under this declaration. We move on now to slightly more detailed articles. So Article 3 says everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of person. And I'll combine that with number 9, which is no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention or exile. Now, since March 2020, we've had in Britain this concept of lockdown, something I've never ever seen before. I've never seen anything like it, even in wartime. This means that governments have taken it upon themselves to tell people where they can go and when they can go. For me, living out here in the country, nice house, reasonably big garden, it's not been too bad. It's been a lovely summer. I've been able to get out and about. But this has condemned people to spending a whole summer cooped up in a flat somewhere with kids, and it's an extraordinarily hard thing to do. As far as I can see, that instruction to stay at home, not go anywhere, counts as a breach of Article 3 and Article 9. Article 12 says no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home or correspondence. Well, that's the lockdown again is very much interfering with the home and the family by putting them under very strict instructions as to what they can do. Article 13 has two parts, 13.1 and 13.2. 13.1 says everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. And Article 13.2 says everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country. Right at the moment, there are probably police patrols on the border between England and Wales, stopping people travelling between the two countries. And as I said before, the lockdown itself has restricted movements within the borders of each of the states. Here in southern Scotland, at one point we were apparently restricted to a journey of 5 miles, I think it was, from home. 5 miles from here doesn't get you anywhere. The nearest big town to here is 12 miles away. So a 5 mile journey is fairly pointless. So Article 13 has been breached as well. Article 18. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship and observance. Church of Scotland had put out guidance at the start of all this in March, April time to shut the churches. And some of the churches have only just opened. I know of one which has just opened early October, particularly. So that's several months the church was completely cold. I'm not entirely sure whether that was as a result of the government's instructions itself or whether it was the Church of Scotland making up its own rules. It has some very, very strict rules on attendance. The local church here, even with the government spacing regulations, could easily accommodate 300 or more people. The Kirk says 50, and it's been a bit of a problem here because they've had a particularly important service that a lot of people wanted to visit, and they had to have it in relays to get everybody in. So Article 18, there's been severe interference with the right to religion in this country and others because of the rules that the government has put down. So, because even if the Kirk had done it on had interpreted the rules in their own way, the rules were put out by the government, so that's a problem. Article 21. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. The right to peaceful association is also the right to peaceful demonstration. And we've seen recently that the right to peaceful demonstration is rather subjective. We saw 2 or 3 weeks ago in Trafalgar Square in London that the police fairly forcefully broke up an apparently completely peaceful demonstration against the measures that we're talking about here. So that's a problem. So that's Article 20 Part 1 is breached. Article 23 Part 1. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favourable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. Well, ask anybody in the hospitality trade right now whether they have the freedom to work. The government has decided that industries, particularly industries, just have to shut. It's an interference in business that we've never seen before from any government. Again, as I say, even in wartime. No government has ever taken it upon itself to just completely shut down industries. And because it's a government doing it, they don't get it right. And then we're into arguments now as to what constitutes a cafe, whether it's a restaurant, is it a pub? If it's a pub, is it allowed to sell alcohol? If it doesn't sell alcohol, is it a pub? There's all sorts of nonsense going on. But the government is severely interfering with the right to work. Article 25.1, and this is actually possibly one of the most important ones, and it's one that we'll be talking about in future videos. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Now, the particular point of this is medical care. In order to ensure that the National Health Service would not be overwhelmed by the deluge of COVID-19 cases that was expected in the early part of the year, basically the entire health service in Britain was shut down and devoted to COVID patients. This wasn't just the National Health Service either, the publicly owned service, this was all of the private service as well. The NHS effectively commandeered private hospitals and closed them. I don't know why. I cannot understand why closing one facility helps to free up space in another one, but that's what happened. Because of this, a lot of conditions other than respiratory conditions have been left entirely untreated. We've got a growing problem now, particularly with cancer patients who have not had conditions diagnosed and will have their treatment started very much later than they should have done. Orthopaedic one, I know particularly, has stopped and have only recently started to come back again, but are still not back at full strength. And the NHS is still apparently largely shut down and devoted to COVID-19. That's a big problem, and it's going to be a bigger problem, and it's one that we'll come back to in future videos. 26.1. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. Well, the government shut the schools. So they took away the right to education of, well, pretty much every school kid. We now have the stage where a lot of universities are shut, so the higher education sector's damaged as well. So, as far as I can see, Article 26.1 has been breached by the government. Article 27.1. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. Well, we don't have a cultural life anymore. The government has decided that, well, wherever you are, it could be a different number, but the famous slogan is the rule of 6. You can't get more than 6 people together. If you can't get more than 6 people together, you're not going to get much of a band. You can't stage a play. Public talks are not worth having if you only have an audience of 6. Well, 5, the speaker plus 5 audience members. So the cultural life of the country has just been shut down. So Article 27.1 has been breached. Article 28. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration can be fully realised. Well, we've seen in the previous ones that they've all been breached. So the rights declared within each of these articles cannot be realised. So Article 28 has been breached. Article 29.2 states, in the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law, solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others, and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and this is an important bit, the general welfare in a democratic society. Now this is a bit which governments could use to justify their interference with all of the previous articles, although many of them previously said contained the word arbitrary, and much of the restriction that's been placed on our liberties is arbitrary, as there has been no justification, no serious justification for it. Again, something we'll talk about in future videos. However, the governments can't use 29.2 to justify their actions, because Article 30 says nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth herein. So, they can't do it. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that the government cannot do many of the things that it's currently doing. What can we do about it? Answers on a postcard, please. See you in the next video.